Thank you. This close. Oh, this is better. Okay. Thank you very much for that very, very generous and warm welcome. It's nice to know that I am both distinguished and seasoned. Hopefully, I'll be able to finish my message today because I have such grandiose ideas of who I am now. But having said that, I'd like to begin by thanking. I see my picture up there, Eitaikyo Special Service. I'm not used to that, but hey, I can see why you would think that I was distinguished then. I'm kidding. But I did want to take this opportunity to thank the Orange County Buddhist Church for welcoming me back. But let me begin my message by reading a kosandai. Namandal. 人、世間愛欲の中にありて、一人生まれ、一人死し、一人去り、一人来たる。行にあたりて、苦楽の地に至り、赴く。自らこれを受くるに変わるものあることなしとなまんだ。In the midst of worldly desires and attachments, one comes and goes alone, is born alone, and dies alone. After death, one goes to a painful or pleasant state of existence. Each receives their karmic consequences, and nobody else can take their place. Before I begin explaining the kosandai that I just finished reading, I'd like to once again thank the Orange County Buddhist Temple, Buddhist Church, beginning with Reverend Wondra and Reverend Turner for inviting me to participate in your 2023 Eitaikyo service, or Eitaikyo Hoyo. And the passage that I quoted is taken from the larger Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra. For those of you who remember, this is the same passage that I quoted on 2021 when I was last invited to your Eitaikyo service. This time, however, I'm using the translation that is found in the 3 Pure Land Sutras published as part of the Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai English Tripitaka project. The larger Sukhavati Vyuha Sutra, which is often simply referred to as Larger Sutra, can be considered the primary text of our tradition, especially because it is this sutra that Shinran Shonin, the founder of our tradition, called Jodo Shinshu. And Jodo Shinshu literally means true essence of the Pure Land. So it is this text in particular, this lesson by Shakyamuni Buddha in particular, that describes for us the essence of the Pure Land. And by calling this larger sutra Jodo Shinshu, Shinran Shonin is letting us know that the larger sutra expresses the true essence of the Pure Land teaching. Describing this sutra briefly, it is comprised of 2 scrolls, the upper scroll and the lower scroll. We would probably call these scrolls volumes now. Because the sutra is comprised of 2 scrolls, or 2 volumes, it is also sometimes referred to as the double-scrolled sutra. Generally, the contents of the upper scroll is focused on the causes of the Pure Land and the results or effects of those causes, and the lower scroll is focused on the causes of birth in the Pure Land and the effects that occurs because of those causes. And the passage that I gave to begin my message with, the Gosandai, is taken from the lower scroll. In the larger sutra, the Gosandai passage that I quoted is presented as a message given by Shakyamuni Buddha to Maitreya Bodhisattva. Maitreya Bodhisattva is prophesied to become the Buddha of our world once they complete and perfect their practices. Unfortunately, this is expected to happen 5,670,000,000 years after Shakyamuni Buddha left our world, so this is not expected to happen for quite some time. This is part of the reason why the larger sutra becomes so important. It is the teaching that will continue to enlighten people even throughout the period when there is no Buddha in our world. Again, the Gosandai that I quoted is taken from the larger sutra where Shakyamuni Buddha describes to Maitreya Bodhisattva, and again, Maitreya Bodhisattva will replace Shakyamuni Buddha as the Buddha in our world, why we should choose birth in the Pure Land and why we should want to leave this world. One of the reasons given for wanting to leave this world is because this world of ours is found in the midst of worldly desires and attachments. While we continue to cling to our attachments, we remain focused on ourselves. Because we are focused on ourselves, the results of anything that we do also necessarily is focused on ourselves. Again, quoting the passage again, this self-centered focus leads to the result of one comes alone and goes alone, is born alone and dies alone. After death, one goes to a painful or pleasant state of existence. Each receives their karmic consequences, and nobody else can take their place. If all we do is think about ourselves, the passage is suggesting that the only outcome is a solitary and lonely one. The phrase is born alone and dies alone is especially poignant. It is poignant because we can imagine what it would mean if we died and there was absolutely no one to think about us when we did. This would have to be called what it means to be lonely. If we were told, for example, your being born or not being born makes absolutely no difference whatsoever, I'm sure that we would feel crushed. Being told this would completely negate our existence, our entire lives. We are being told basically that this entire life of mine really didn't matter that much. Nobody thinking about us when we died amounts to being told this very thing. What else can be said but how lonely? In a certain sense, part of the reason why we hold funeral services also is so that we can avoid this kind of feeling. And a funeral service, in this sense, is like having a farewell party for your life. Given this similarity, I'd like to share a little story about my experience with farewell parties while I was studying in Japan. Let me begin my story by first sharing my theory on why we hold farewell parties. I think the main reason why we hold farewell parties is because we have to part ways with someone that we know. And before you get upset at me for sharing the obvious, let me defend myself by saying that I never said that my theory was going to be mind-shattering. But the only reason for making it a party, meaning group, is because we can't go with the person we are saying farewell to. If we could, we might join them on their journey, But because we can't, we hold the party to wish them well and to express the sentiment until we meet again. In my experience with farewell parties in Japan, there were those who attended because they may have felt obligated. But by and large, everyone that attended was sincere when they said things like, "You did a good job. You did very well for yourself." Or, in the case of going back to your mother country to become a Jodo Shinshu priest, work hard as a priest, just as you did as a student, and I'm sure you will do well. Be well, and let's meet again. When we hear these kinds of words, we feel supported. We feel encouraged. In other words, these words help to give us the strength to move forward, even while having to leave everyone that supported us. And in my training, in my wanting to become a Jodo Shinshu Kaikyoshi, or overseas missionary, I was fortunately able to study in Japan for 7 years. During the time of my studies, the average stay for an overseas student was 2 to 3 years. Longer stays were generally for 4 to 5 years. And given this description, you can tell that I got to stay much longer than most. But it was also because of this fact that I had to see many people off as they all returned home, one after the other. Let me backtrack a little and say that while I was studying in Japan, it was a very exciting time. There were students from throughout the world in Japan at the time. There were students from Hawaii, Canada, Brazil, Argentina, and everybody was studying Jodo Shinshu. At one time, there were 7 or 8 of us at the same time studying in Japan, all studying the Nembutsu. However, over time, fewer and fewer overseas students came. Eventually, our numbers dropped as everyone started to go home to share what they learned with their friends and families in their native countries, in their native tongues. Because there were fewer and fewer overseas students, the number of people who came to attend these farewell parties also became fewer and fewer. By the time my turn to go home came around, there were only 2 of us, myself included. Because the other remaining student was going home to the United States just 1 month after me, we decided that there was really no point in holding a farewell party for each other. In the end, I did not get a farewell party. I attended 10 or more farewell parties for others, and I planned 7 or 8 of them because of my senior status within the group. Despite this, when it was my turn to go home, nothing. Yeah. To be honest, it felt really sad. Actually, just talking about it still makes me feel sad. And if it didn't make me feel sad, I probably wouldn't still be talking about this more than 25 years after the fact. It feels sad because at one level or another, I felt left out. It felt like nobody cared if I was leaving or not. Of course, thinking this way is very selfish. So, getting back to the topic of funeral services, do we hold funeral services so that those who have gone before us don't feel this sadness? And I'm sure everyone here has your own answer, but if we see those who have died before us as simply no longer existing, then I will have to grant you that maybe holding a funeral service is not that important. It may very well be true that for the deceased, they cannot feel sadness or loneliness, and because of that, if dispelling the deceased's loneliness is the reason to hold a funeral service, then there might not actually be a need to hold this service or a farewell gathering for their lives. Having said that, however, let me quote the passage again. In the midst of worldly desires and attachments, one comes and goes alone, is born alone, and dies alone. After death, one goes to a painful or pleasant state of existence. Each receives their karmic consequences, and nobody else can take their place. Why do you suppose that having a farewell party is so meaningful for some? Based on the unique perspective of having to experience not having a farewell party, I think what makes a farewell party so wonderful is that it helps to give you a sense that even while you have to become physically separated from your friends are trying to help show you that you aren't really alone. You will not be forgotten. Your life did impact others. Although I am personally convinced that a Jodo Shinshu funeral provides the same message, I also think that the message giver is reversed in the case of a funeral. In the case of the funeral, it isn't those who are staying behind that are telling the person who has left, but the person who has gone to the Pure Land who is telling all of us who are left behind that you never, ever have to worry about being alone. Because the person who has gone to the Pure Land has become a Buddha, they do not just think about themselves. And as is suggested by what I just said, I firmly believe is not strong enough a word, but my faith is such that I know that with faith I will be born in the Pure Land of Amida Buddha. This is a fact to me. It is not a fiction to me. I'm not saying that you have to agree with how I feel or how I understand things, but this is the perspective from which I am speaking from. Because a person born in the Pure Land becomes a Buddha, they cannot think just about themselves. For example, Shinran Shonin shares the following phrase again and again in their writings. The Shonin writes, "Those who meet with the power of the fundamental vow, there are none who live their lives in vain." In other words, if you meet with the power of the fundamental vow, if you meet with Namo Amida Butsu, then you will never, ever be able to conclude that your life was meaningless or empty. Shakyamuni Buddha, for example, used their physical form, their own bodies, to demonstrate to all of us, to teach all of us that if you are born, you have to die. While embodying this truth, however, Shakyamuni Buddha also taught us the larger sutra. The larger sutra is still being shared today, even while Shakyamuni Buddha's body is not. In chanting the Sambutsuge today, for example, we were also chanting from the larger sutra. Through these activities, we continue to hear the words of the Buddha. in this world of ours, if we do not rely on the power of the fundamental vow, we may have to experience the reality of being born alone and dying alone. However, the reason why Amida Buddha gave rise to the fundamental vow and fulfilled it for all of us is to let us know that it does not have to be this way. The vow of Amida Buddha is telling us that we never really have to be born alone. We never really have to die alone. Namo Amida Butsu does not want us to live a life of emptiness or a life of loneliness. Today's service is being held so that we can meet with Amida Buddha's vow. In other words, we are being helped to meet with and to hear Namo Amida Butsu. All those who have gone to the Pure Land before us are the ones who are holding this service for us. And if we can accept this, then we also have to acknowledge that those who have gone to the Pure Land did not just disappear. Instead, it is because they continue to have the fervent desire of establishing a temple that can share the teachings of the Buddha, and for Jodo Shinshu, the largest sutra in particular, that they have established and maintained this tradition of holding an Eitaikyo, or perpetual sutra service, for us. We might be gathered in their memory, and in doing so, assure the continuation of this tradition. But at the same time, those who we are remembering are, at this time, this moment, they are all helping us to hear Namo Amida Butsu, right here, right now. And if you are hearing it right here, right now, then you know for a fact that this is very real. While we are hearing, while we are allowed to hear Namo Amida Butsu, aren't we the ones who are being helped to not live a life of emptiness or of loneliness? We are being told that this life of mine matters, that this life of mine is important. And that's why, from the Pure Land, we are going to do everything that we can to make sure that you are able to hear Namo Amida Butsu. Those we are remembering today, they are no longer just thinking about themselves. They are all thinking about each and every one of us. And if we are thinking of them, and if the word them is not empty and has meaning to you, then not only did they not just disappear, they are also helping us to not just think about ourselves as well. And when we think about others, that's when we guarantee that we will not live solitary and lonely lives. We are being helped to live a life of belonging. We are being moved towards living a life filled with wisdom and compassion. Because life is not just lived for 30, 40 minutes on any given Sunday, please continue to listen to the Nembutsu even after today's service. Through hearing the calling voice of the Buddha and all those who have gone to the Pure Land before us, please let this be a reminder that we never ever have to live a life of emptiness, and that instead we can live our lives filled with Namo Amida Butsu. And if we do this, then I am sure that we will live lives of tremendous meaning and of even greater joy. Or the life that those who gave us this temple and this teaching hoped that we would discover and live for ourselves. With this thought, I'd like to conclude my message and to once again thank everyone for allowing me to come and share in this service with you today, and for all of your hospitality and all of your flattering words, not the least of which includes Namo Amida Butsu. Thank you. Namanda, 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 namanda.